There was a small element of excitement and like, shit, like this is it, like we're on the front line. Like somebody coined it the Battle of Trafalgar, which I thought was quite profound because it was real. It did feel like you were in a space where you were making history. My name is Henry Jay Kamara. I'm a photographer and visual artist from London, and today I'm here to talk about my images from the Black Lives Matter protest. So this was around the time where Tommy Robinson had just put out the threat that he was going to come and be at the Black Lives Matter protest as well. So this was actually on that day, on the Saturday. This guy was actually part of the stand against the Tommy Robinson anti-protest. So he was part of an organization called Love Me Black. His mum had just spoken about her struggle and her journey into the UK and the fact that despite so many years have been passed, you know, she stands next to her son and listens to her son have a conversation to his generation about the same struggles that she had gone through. I like the flare in the bottom here. I like how I've captured him mid-speech. He's not necessarily looking at me. It's not like a portrait. It's more of, you know, I'm here and I'm listening to what he's saying and I've captured that moment. Growing up, you never saw a lot of images like this in the press of, you know, young black men addressing crowds, you know, speaking truth, not necessarily looking particularly dangerous. And I just want to draw attention to this sign at the back, don't let the system get you down. That was the overriding message, you know, understanding that you don't have to let the system make you feel like you can't love yourself and put yourself first. And I think that that's what this moment really culminates for me. It was, you know, at the steps of Trafalgar Square. For me, this is just a very powerful image of unification, solidarity, and just making sure that your voice is heard. It was an occasion when I was going to work, actually. I was going to a meeting, and it was around the time where there was a lot of stabbings in London, and the chief of police had increased their ability to use stop and search as a means to prevent crime. I was approached and they sort of like said that, was I aware that there had been 7 stabbings in the past 2 weeks in this area, etc., etc. And one of them tries to grab me and says, we're gonna search you and you look suspicious, you might carry a weapon. In that moment, I tried to bring them to the understanding of their conditioning and the reasons as to why they felt I was a threat. It was a moment where I was faced with the reality of what I look like and how it can have an effect on people's perceptions. And I think that is what I'm most interested in. You know, I understand that perceptions are built off of things that are casually accepted as normal. So this image actually came about from a moment when we received some threats and some objects thrown at us, and we turned around and chose to form a line of solidarity to protect the most vulnerable protesters. And this moment came from 3 young men just linking arms, and I think that it was just super powerful. I think what I am happy with is the composition of the image. I think that there is a nice sort of like rule of thirds going on, and I like the tones and the differences of attire that the 3 guys are wearing and how that presents like a nice contrast. I guess for me, the reason why I chose to specifically capture the linking of arms in this image and not necessarily focus on who the people were specifically was because I wanted this image to be representative of solidarity and unity despite, you know, who you are and where you come from. And I've actually shared the image with Respect, who, you know, is sort of like part of Gangs Unite. And he really liked this image because I think, again, like it just kind of like captures the essence of what they're trying to do. You know, gang truce, despite being from different sides, being able to stand together in solidarity to confront the common enemy. This is probably one of my favorite images, like, ever. I just think because of the moment and what this picture represents, I think it's one of the most powerful images I've taken. So this image came about when we had sort of reconvened on the steps of Trafalgar Square, because I think this image just really captures everybody's spirit, everybody's intent. These guys were sort of like the leaders of the group. His message was particularly at this point making sure that in this moment of solidarity, everybody here understands that they are making a stand against racism. And in order to do so, we must stand together as one, not necessarily go off and fight under individual groups. And at that moment in time, we had just been split up as a group, and you know, people were going off to have a fight and people were being drawn here and there. And there was this moment of culmination back on the stairs of Trafalgar Square. I think one of the most significant signs is this one here. It says, oppose Tommy Robinson and don't let the racists divide us. And can't really see this one fully, but it says, no racist pricks are allowed on this estate. You know where they have these like no ball games are allowed on this estate signs. So this is actually like a remake of that. And I think that, you know, growing up, not being able to play football in your estate is like the biggest violation to your human rights as a 12-year-old kid growing up in a state when, you know, you've got limited access to gardens and grass areas and you want to play football. So I think it's really significant that that sign is being used by a young black person, because in their language, that is the biggest way of like having that conversation and representing how they feel. Oh, I actually just noticed the top of Stormzy's head is in this photo. But yeah, I think it's important that the context of this image is understood, and you know, it being in London and it being about the black experience in the UK, I think it adds that context to the image. You know where you are because of the National Gallery, and it just gives that sense of place. And yeah, I'm really happy with this image. If I had to sum up the energy that day, how I was feeling, I think it would probably be profound. Just because, you know, it's one of the first organized protests that I felt so close to. It was infectious because there is a fear like that we have when we are by ourselves to like really say what we want. But when you're around people, there's this like shared sense of we're just gonna say whatever the fuck we want, basically. That is so encouraging, and it's a feeling that I can't really describe. Like, it's this sort of like reconnection with what is important. And I think that there's this sort of like sense that everybody walking around had this unity. There was this like, we are all on the same thing, basically. And that was something that I had like never really felt as intensely as I did in that moment, because it was so clear what we were there for and what we were trying to achieve, and it didn't matter like what was in our way, and that was super special. Something that's gonna stay with me for a long time.